Our preaching text today is from Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Blessings to all this wonderful sunny Sunday. Does not every living person want to have God on his or her side? The psalm we just heard, Psalm 13, is a lament, a questioning of God's presence and protection. How long, O Lord? Indeed. Could not every one of us lament from time to time, how long, O Lord? This lament is a lament for adults. What might be the equivalent lament in the language of our children? What's the universal refrain of children when they are on a long journey, especially in a car? Are we there yet? I believe "Are we there yet" can be as good a way as any for interpreting how long, O Lord. Are we there yet? Gracious God, are we there yet? Even though we humans seem to be the last species divinely created, we've still been on a long journey, spread out over thousands and thousands of years. We've been trying to get home for countless eons. And where is home? Home can only be found in the eternal embrace of our Creator. We come from God and we return to God. In between, we wander the world where we are decidedly prone to homesickness. Homesickness may well be the primal human condition. Sisters and brothers, have you ever been homesick? I've been homesick many times. I remember being homesick when I left home at the age of 13 to live in a high school boarding seminary. I remember being homesick when the home in which I spent my childhood at 7647 South Sangamon Street had to be sold because of the rapaciousness of unscrupulous realtors. I remember being homesick when I went away to college in Quincy, Illinois. I remember being homesick during the years I spent away from Chicago. In all, I spent over 25 years away from sweet home Chicago. Homesickness can feel like a kind of dying. I remember the first year I spent as a campus minister at Louisiana Tech University in Ruston, Louisiana. I felt like I was dying. It took a good deal of time and a good deal of effort for me to feel comfortable living in the rural South. I spent 7 years there, 3 in Ruston and 4 at Grambling State University, Grambling, Louisiana. But I'd watch movies filmed in Chicago, and I'd feel terribly homesick. I felt myself exiled. But of course, all of us live in exile. And please understand, church, I'm very aware Chicago harbors its share of difficulties and challenges. Life in our city is sometimes far from pleasant. But I find myself anxious when I'm away from Chicago for a long time. I feel at home in Chicago. I feel at peace in Chicago. In some strange sense, I feel very bonded to the city of Chicago. Chicago is my home. Of course, where Beth and I might be in the future rests in God's hands. But I believe homesickness, brothers and sisters, homesickness is what we are suffering when we cry out, "How long, O Lord?" Homesickness is what we are suffering when we cry out, "Are we there yet?" As I mentioned, our home is with God. It's where we began and it's where we end. We begin our life journey with God. We end our life journey with God. As the spiritual writer Richard Rohr writes in his most recent book, Falling Upward, A Spirituality for the Two Halves of Life, we are both driven out and called back by a kind of deep homesickness. There is an inherent dissatisfaction that both sends and draws us forward. And it comes from our original and radical union with God. What appears to be past and future is in fact the same home, the same call, and the same God for whom 1,000 years are like a single day, and a single day like 1,000 years. So what Rohr is telling us, church, is that we all suffer from a radical homesickness, which can wear away at us as we make our way through this world. As Rohr continues, I think of Hermann Hesse's novel Steppenwolf, in which he says, "We have no one to guide us. Our only guide is our homesickness." Even Dorothy is guided forward to Oz and back to Kansas by her constant love and search for home. It is part of the reason the story has such lasting appeal. Home is another word for the spirit that we are, our true self in God. The same self moment that we find God in ourselves, we also find ourselves inside God. And this is the full homecoming, according to the Christian mystic Teresa of Avila. Until then, we are homesick. Although today most would probably call it loneliness, isolation, longing, sadness, restlessness, or even a kind of depression. How long, O Lord? Gracious God, are we there yet? Home. When do we get home? And will we recognize home when we find it? Was the North Carolina author Thomas Wolfe right when he wrote, "You can't go home again"? It might help us today to hear a couple of definitions for home. The first is a famous one from the New England poet Robert Frost's 1914 poem, Death of the Hired Man. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. It's a good definition for us to ponder. Let's listen to two more. The Kentucky columnist John Ed Pierce wrote, "Home is the place you grow up wanting to leave and grow old wanting to get back to." This definition certainly speaks to our innate human homesickness. The 20th century German poet Christian Morgenstern wrote this reflection: "Home is not where you live, but where they understand you." Brothers and sisters, where is our home? Our home is with God. But on earth there are places where we can feel at home. For the past 4 years, my home is with my beloved Beth. Doesn't matter too much where we live, our home is together. And I also add that for the past 3 years, our home has also been here at Morgan Park Baptist Church. And I pray this church may be a place where everyone feels at home. Home is not where you live, but where they understand you. May God help us make Morgan Park Baptist Church a home where everyone is understood. A place where when you come here, we are delighted to take you in. How long, O Lord? Gracious God, are we there yet? Sisters and brothers, we need to get in touch with our homesickness, our longing to return to where we began in the heart of God. Because when we are in touch with our innate homesickness, it's then that we begin to live deeply. Too often, too many people live on the surface of things. Too often, too many live only superficially. As Rohr cautions us, the shape of evil is much more superficiality and blindness than the usually listed hot sins. God hides and is found precisely in the depths of everything. Sin is to stay on the surface. Today, I wish to challenge all of us here to begin and continue living in the depths, to refuse to rest contentedly on the surface of things. If we get in touch with our innate homesickness, if we allow it to drive us forward into the depths, if we refuse to quiet its persistence with addictive behaviors and vacuous living, then we will not have to wait for heaven to claim us before we fully encounter our Creator. Brothers and sisters, let's never forget, sin is to stay on the surface. Let's never forget that we can't get home if we're content with skimming the surface. Let me say this again. We can't get home if we're content with skimming the surface. And here it is. We can't explore the depths if we spend all of our time watching television. According to the most recent Nielsen research, the average American now watches over 35 hours of television every week, more than 5 hours per day on average. Now, church, how is it possible to explore the depths? How is it possible to discover the God who lives in the depths of things if we sit in front of television over 35 hours per week? It just can't be done. I think it'd be a helpful spiritual discipline to set aside at least one day a week when we don't turn on our televisions. Please consider such a discipline. I promise you, I will abstain from television at least this much. One day a week. My beloved Beth only watches an occasional Netflix movie. How long, O Lord? Gracious God, are we there yet? Here's a quotation from the poet, author, and activist Maya Angelou. I long, as does every human being, to be at home wherever I find myself. Sisters and brothers, the only way to be at home wherever we find ourselves is to stop living on the surface and to live in the depths. This is why our Creator fashioned us with an innate homesickness. God made us the way we are so we might live in the depths and shun surface living. How long, O Lord? Not long. Only as long as it takes for us to stop skimming the surface. Gracious God, are we there yet? Not yet. But God has us by the hand, and we are on our way home. Amen.